Hello, my name is Dr. Sarah Smith-Frigerio, and I am an assistant professor at Columbus State University. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about qualitative coding and collapsing codes into themes. But before I get into that, I want to take a moment to introduce myself and what my research interests are. So I focus a lot on health and crisis communication research. I'm really interested in how we talk about mental health concerns, how we represent them in the media, how we talk about them online, and even how we talk about them interpersonally with our social networks. I'm also really interested in disability and how disabled folks and organizations that work with disabled folks engage in advocacy and activism online and through social media. So that's where a lot of my research work happens. As you've probably guessed, I'm a qualitative researcher primarily, and I really kind of sit on that line between the interpretive paradigm and the critical paradigm. So I do a lot of interpretive work like focus groups and interviews and case study analyses, but I also bring in a critical perspective, looking at normative assessments, what we should be doing, who benefits and who doesn't benefit from the status quo, things along those lines. So if you've ever read anything by Freire about critical consciousness and working together with the people who are attempting to solve a problem or who have identified a problem, then you will have a better understanding of what this critical interpretive work looks like. I was trained both in quantitative and qualitative work, which is pretty common for folks who are interested in health communication, but I do gravitate towards qualitative. And so, like I said before, I've done a lot of interviews, case studies, focus groups, and even textual analysis, particularly of social media posts and texts. One of the projects I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about is a colleague and I are looking through TikTok and looking at corrective health messaging that is combating misinformation about COVID-19. So I spend a lot of time on TikTok these days. And we're looking at these and we are evaluating them for the meanings and the understandings in these videos and also in the comments and the way others who view these videos engage with these videos. So that's something I find to be really interesting right now. As you probably know, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of questions and concerns about COVID-19, especially amongst younger folks. And TikTok is a great place to be able to kind of look and see these conversations happening in real time and how people are responding to videos that are trying to correct things about how COVID is spread, what symptoms of COVID look like, and especially about the vaccine right now as well. So now that you know a little bit more about what I do and what I'm interested in, I want to jump in to talking about coding and collapsing codes into themes. I think this is a really important skill for brand new researchers to learn. I know that brand new researchers can oftentimes feel really overwhelmed by qualitative research. It feels messy, or they don't think that they're doing it necessarily in the right way. So I have some tips and tricks for you to keep in mind when you engage in your first qualitative project. So, analytic memoing. This is something that is advocated for by Sharma. She's a brilliant scholar, and you should really take a look at what she has to say about analytic memoing. But the simplified version is this. When you're going through your data and you're working to really become familiar with it and start thinking about codes and possible themes, take notes. Those notes are really important for you, but they might also become data in and of themselves as well. If you're keeping track of what you're doing, the thoughts that you're having about your research, the questions that you have about your data, it's easier for you to keep that momentum going and to keep up and not feel overwhelmed when you have to take a break and then come back to it. But it also might lead to some epiphanies that you have later on, and it might also help you write up your results later on too. So analytic memoing is definitely something that I think all of us should do. I kind of think of it as almost like showing your work back when you were in algebra class in high school. Another thing that I think is really important when it comes to coding and theme generation is find other people that you can talk about these codes with and your themes with. So that might be your professor or a faculty mentor. You might set up a research group of fellow students that can help walk you through the process, somebody that you can brainstorm with or bounce ideas off of. Those can be really helpful activities, especially someone who is not as familiar or into the data as you are. That gives them it gives you a fresh perspective from their end, but also they might see things that you're not seeing. Or you might be seeing something, but you're in so deep that you're not articulating it well or not able to get that across right off the bat. And they can help you be able to describe that in a way that really resonates with other readers that you'll have down the line. So that's really important to kind of make yourself a research group with people that you trust and respect who are willing to bounce out or have ideas bounced off of them. And of course, it's really helpful if you reciprocate that for them as well. I also like to think about taking your codes directly from your research question or questions. So one of the things that I still do to this day, even after doing qualitative research for years, is I take my research questions and I underline important parts or constructs in those research questions that I want to be sure to look for when I'm going through my data and starting to identify codes. Now, obviously, it's important to remove our bias and keep an open mind as much as possible so that codes that we may not have necessarily anticipated have the opportunity to crop up or emerge. But at the same time, we really want to keep our coding and our analysis on track with our research questions. So going back to our research questions, identifying things we think are really important there and we want to be sure to look for in our data is another good way to help you with starting the coding process especially. And then when we get to taking those codes and collapsing them into themes, and this may sound a little silly, but I'm telling you, it works so well for me. Take your codes and write them on Post-it notes and put codes that are very similar to one another, close to one another, and start creating like a tree. So you'll have your research question at the bottom, and then you'll have groups of branches or codes together. And then you can when they're Post-it notes, you can move them around and you can think about it and play with it and see what works best. And then you can develop your overall themes from that. You can collapse those codes together into a general theme that, again, still is connected and ties back into your research question at the bottom or the trunk of the tree. I know it sounds a little silly when you're doing it, but it is super helpful, especially for visual learners, to be able to manipulate that data and see it laid out in front of you. I did that even for my dissertation. It was a lot, but I took over the whole dining room table, but it was super helpful for me to do that. Of course, you always want to keep whatever theory you're using to help you in answering your research question in mind. And so when you're working through codes and you're starting to think about collapsing those codes into themes, keep that theory at the forefront of your mind so that you can sit there and ask yourself, how would this theme really help or benefit or contribute to or explain a part of the theory that I am using? How does it move it forward? Is it in conflict with the theory? Is there something else possibly going on? These are really important things to do, and again, that visualization can also really help you as well. Finally, I have found that hard copy works best for me. That's not everybody's cup of tea, but it works best for me. And then I have a whole collection of markers and highlighters and things like that to help me visually represent my data as I'm going through it on the printed out page as well. So there's lots of tips and tricks that can help you with coding and collapsing into themes, especially if you're new to qualitative research. I recommend making your data visual and being able to move it around and play with it in these ways. I really recommend keeping your research questions and your theory at the forefront of your mind and being able to circle back to that and make sure that you're staying on track. Of course, we want to keep an open mind so that codes and themes can emerge. When some of the most exciting stuff we do in research is emergent themes that we didn't necessarily anticipate coming from the data. And finally, make sure that you have a group of people you really trust and respect, will give you good advice, and will be more than willing to let you bounce ideas off of them. And this will help you a lot, especially researchers doing this for the first time, when you're trying to deal with a large bit of data and you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way and not get overwhelmed. I hope this is helpful to you. So you please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Again, my name is Dr. Sarah Smith-Frigerio. I'm at Columbus State University. I'm also on Twitter at SSFRIGERIO. So please feel free to reach out to me there if you have any questions. And I hope that you have a blast working on your first qualitative project.